Hey guys, today we're doing something a little bit different. With the Back 4 Blood Alpha now wrapped up, giving us a giant sample of what's to come with the core gameplay and elements that will carry what has been touted as a spiritual successor to the critically acclaimed series Left 4 Dead. But going forward, there will be many instances where I compare Back 4 Blood to Left 4 Dead. But do not go into this thinking it's a direct sequel or that I want it to be a carbon copy of what Left 4 Dead 2 offered in 2009. I fully expected this new game to be its own entity with inspirations from their first title, basically as if Left 4 Dead was the foundation, but we have many gameplay elements built upon it to give it its own identity. I'm making today's video because if you are an OG subscriber of the channel, you'll know just how much the Left 4 Dead franchise means to me and how I religiously played it for the 12 years that it's been out. And I want to do this video to point out my appraisals, criticisms, which there are quite a few, and what should be tweaked about the alpha gameplay that serves as an open forum discussion and precursor to a AAA title releasing in merely 6 months. Remember, these are my opinions and thoughts on the alpha. Yes, alpha. So none of what we saw is 100% a part of the game's official release, or neither am I saying that this is Left 4 Dead 3. Today, we are going over and reviewing the alpha gameplay of Back 4 Blood. This video will be split up into various categories with timestamps so you can quickly see my thoughts and opinions on the alpha in its many bits, so feel free to skip through as you like as we start with the core gameplay. From the start, it definitely has what a Left 4 Dead fan would love. 4 survivors with quirky voice lines interacting against waves of the undead, or Ridden, with special variations to force cooperative play and teamwork. The optimization wasn't the best, and I would notice frequent frame rate drops in certain areas, and certain animations looked a bit wonky. But these issues I can forgive pretty quickly since it's an alpha on servers that are still getting tested, although the whole getting insta-killed by climbing down ladders is a bit annoying. But overall, for an alpha, the game ran pretty damn smoothly and was fun to play with friends as we discovered new things that the actual gameplay and not just the graphics or specs offered. And one new addition is a major game changer. The biggest addition to the game from its predecessors is the card system. An interesting dynamic that can make your playthrough diverse and different each time with how you play, how you interact with your team, and how you survive against hordes of Ridden. Survivors can build 15 card decks where the first card is guaranteed to be in your inventory to start with, and the rest can be picked from a set of 3 at the start of each chapter randomly, giving an RNG Yu-Gi-Oh style to what you can and can't do with the cards you have chosen. On the surface, it can be fun and interesting to figure out unique and powerful builds that can help. On top of the survivor cards and basically forcing this to be a kind of meta, some Ridden related cards, the corruption cards, can be a dead giveaway. In Left 4 Dead, you never knew when or if a tank would spawn in any given chapter. With the new card system, it makes it readily easy to know what's to come throughout the chapter. When these corruption cards tell you that an ogre will spawn, broadcasting what will be happening to you and everyone else. These set and broadcasted spawns kind of tear away that oh shit moment of something appearing on the map. Despite us having much more deadly ogres, that and when on higher difficulties, you can just restart the campaign if you get a Bruiser swarm. Basically, if you get a card that you don't like, you're going to be resetting a lot. Which, I mean, it's not fun to just reset the game, basically shuffling the deck until you get the desired cards you want and infected spawns you the Survivor one, where you can actively manipulate the director who is supposed to be in control. But at the end of the day, the cards are gonna remain, and I'm not looking forward to just being forced to use certain cards. It's kind of like in Dead by Daylight, where only certain perks are meta, and you're pretty much punished if you don't pick certain cards that will go to your advantage and just try to have fun with the decks that you make. It's still fun to make builds and improve your character's stats though, and see what you can do in tandem with other players. Now this next one I have a lot of mixed feelings about, the currency system in the game. On the positive side, it rewards exploration and gives you a sense of earning something throughout each chapter. On the other hand though, where Left 4 Dead rewarded you searching obscure corners and out of the way places with supplies like pipe bombs, pain pills, defibs, and sometimes special weapons, Back 4 Blood limits that sense of reward. Now that we have the copper system, finding useful supplies is much more scarce, as you are more likely to find piles of copper more than anything else. And buying the items I thought would be more frequently spawned can be a lot more expensive than you would have thought, like grenades being 150 to 200 copper a piece, and healing being just as much, even up to 500 for a health kit. Attachments for your guns, like a reflex sight, can cost up to 700 copper, while stocks that can switch your weapons quick is a good tool. A mostly cosmetic reflex sight that doesn't really feel that you're any more accurate, it's just nice to have, feels like it should be cheaper. On top of that, on higher difficulties, getting newer cards or healing from wall-mounted healing stations can also cost copper. 400 to heal yourself, and you need to spend on a card that you saw laying on the ground in the middle of a zombie apocalypse? Am I just gonna throw copper at a card that's on the ground? While again, the copper mechanic is interesting, and it actually rewards players for having more teammates survive each round with more gold. It is a great incentive to have everyone survive. Well, the survival bonus of up to 150 copper per person is barely anything compared to just letting yourself die and revive in the next safe room with more health. That way you don't have to spend copper on health items that would have costed more than the 150 to 200 you would have got with 3 to 4 survivors, seeing as how expensive everything is. Copper just adds more complexity and weight to gameplay, that it feels more restrictive on players and slows everything down instead of just picking up supplies and going while zombies spawn around you. But on the plus side, having the ability to buy items in safe rooms gives you a semi-guarantee that you won't go into a chapter or finale without necessary supplies like firecrackers and pills. It's nice to at least have the option to have some of these items, whereas in Left 4 Dead, you just need really good RNG in some situations to find supplies like Molotovs and pills outside of safe room medkits. Speaking of that, supplies you can procure while either scavenging about or while purchasing from vendors/supply crates in the safe rooms, and are divided up into 3 categories, being health items like bandages, pain pills, and health kits, throwables like Molotovs, hand grenades, and firecrackers, and carryables like ammo kits, defibrillators, and toolkits. But the sucky part of it is, all healing is restricted to one category. You can only have a health kit or pills or bandages, and healing works like it does in PUBG, only allowing survivors to a restricted amount as signified by a red bar, while blacked out health cannot come back. It can only be restored by pills, which that health is only temporary and it fades over time, which makes healing in general less consistent, usually leading to healing red bar in safe rooms and hoping the one healing item you brought gets its full use, and sometimes finding healing stations that you might have to spend copper on. Some items leave a lot to be desired compared to others. One slot could be a defib to revive teammates, a toolkit to open special loot doors so you can get more supplies, or to unlock alarm doors without setting off a horde, or you could choose an ammo kit that gives you ammo. The offensive slot gives you grenades that explode on impact, firecrackers to distract a horde but there's no deadly element to it, just distraction. It's not like a pipe bomb that blows them up, or a Molotov that doesn't even insta-kill common infected, and on harder difficulties will only just slow common infected down. It is sad to see such an iconic Left 4 Dead item be so useless in the game. I refrain from picking up Molotovs over frag grenades and firecrackers. It just feels useless comparatively. As stated before, supplies are now much harder to come by and can be restricted to in-game paywalls. You would think, hey, I could buy a gun with my hard-earned cash. Nope. Guns at the start of the campaign seem like a rarity, which realistically, yeah, guns hard to find in a real life, yeah. But unless you specifically make a primary weapon like the AK-47 or M1 the first card in your slot, the loadout card, you'll be stuck with a pistol or melee weapon for a while, depending on which survivor you pick, which can be a bit of a headache. This in turn basically forces you to run Weapon Scavenger in your deck to allow more weapons on the map for you and your team. Now, not much to say about the guns. They are perfect as they are, as they play well, shoot well, and are all around, have a nice feeling to using them, with my personal favorite being the AK-47. And it might be controversial for some Left 4 Dead fans, but there is ADS, aiming down sights. It might be like sprinting was to Halo 3 for some hardcore Left 4 Dead fans, but being able to aim where you want to shoot instead of crouching and slowing down to really get an accurate shot, it's a real plus. I love being able to aim down sights. I will say the pump shotgun should still have a bit larger of a clip from its current 3 shells to maybe 5 or 6, as the chaotic mess that is the hordes and specials makes forced reloading after only 3 shots a real pain in the neck. I do like the variety in sidearms, giving us not only the Glock, but a full auto Glock, a revolver, and an SMG that are much better sidearms to use than anything Left 4 Dead had to offer, although ammo is now in finite supply and divided between 4 weapon categories, instead of just one general ammo supply to find and pull from. If you run out of ammo, other survivors can throw you your specific ammo type, like in PUBG, but it can prove to be inconvenient to have to stop what you're doing to throw ammo at other survivors in certain situations. Say, if you run out of ammo when a horde's all around you for both guns, all you can do is really shove, and that's my next point. But overall, the gunplay is probably the best thing about Back 4 Blood, beating out its predecessor in every way. I can't wait to see what other guns crop up in the future. Now, as I was saying about shoving and other stuff, melee weapons felt mostly inefficient when fighting hordes, even with melee-focused card builds. I realize melees are for taking out close targets, but the melee weapons don't feel nearly as meaty enough as they should be. It's sad that the combat knife card, which turns your bash into a melee, ends up being the best melee weapon in the game, with hits to the head from this bash insta-killing commons on any difficulty and being faster than any melee weapon. Even the trademark baseball bat with nails sticking out of it that Holly prides herself on. It feels pointless at times to use a melee weapon when common Ridden would be able to punch you through your swing a majority of the time from very far away, no matter how early or late you timed your melee swing. On top of it all, the Bruisers make melee even more useless, forcing melee builds to use guns, which the strongest melee cards give debuffs to guns, which is counterproductive. They either need to rework how melee weapons work in this game, or buff melee cards with stronger effects, because as they are now, they are extremely weak. Oh! Wait, I'm alive? No, I'm dead. Now that we're past the supplies and weaponry, what about the people that carry those? Now the survivors, I mean cleaners, this is another point where I have to draw heavy comparisons to Left 4 Dead. With Left 4 Dead, the survivors each had unique, interesting, and memorable dialogue that made them feel like real people with real exchanges and interactions with their environments. Here, there wasn't too many interesting dialogue inclusions, except for some few and far between Marvel-style one-liners, but some of them made me laugh, especially from Hoffman, who honestly has some daddy issues.
Wish you could have seen that, Dad.
Kind of acting like Dwight from The Office. I felt like Holly was a home run and fit the badass Tom girl dynamic. confusing Zoe and Ellis, Evangelo being a positive reinforcement guy who freaks out sometimes in situations, and Walker just being a generic badass as well from the army. I didn't see or hear too many interactions between the survivors too often, and mostly they just touted off random stuff and just called out what was going on. Considering we will be getting more survivors in the future, as well as DLC survivors, it'll be interesting to widen the pool of playable people. But that also worries me that unique conversations and dialogue will be fewer and more far between, stretching out the available dialogue that will be there. Their design, while all cool and interesting, can be hard to discern from infected running around on the map. I end up shooting other survivors purely because of them being so covered in blood in the thick darkness of the environment. I mistake them for infected and shoot the ever-living hell out of them, which on higher difficulties is quite an annoyance and can really bog your experience down because you're team killing a lot. But besides their personalities and appearance, there actually being a difference in playability between who you pick changes terms of gameplay and entry for people looking for a quick game or even a serious game. Considering if you want to play someone like Holly, you pretty much have to focus on a melee build with your cards because her base stats pretty much rely on that, even though melees in the game are kind of worthless the harder you choose to play. But there being a difference in who you pick, and if you join a random lobby and the only available survivors are ones you really don't have cards for, it will be kind of difficult. But I do enjoy the survivors at their core and want to see more. Just remember this is an alpha, so maybe there will be more dialogue that will expand their personalities more. And I almost forgot about this, but the stamina coming into factor when it comes to running, either by running away from the infected or trying to save someone that's in webbing, your stamina running out can really make that annoying and quite a hindrance, especially when you're meleeing and shoving also take down your stamina. If you're a character that doesn't have perks and base stamina, it's going to be quite annoying. I don't know how to feel about the stamina right now. Let me know in the comments what you think. Now, who are we facing as these survivors? So this game's infected, the Ridden, do come in a wide variety of numerous creatures to shoot at, like the commons, who have all their own look and feel and are pretty fun to tear through with a variety of weapons. The sound effects of lighting them up is very satisfying, even though the gore could be a little better, but again, it's an alpha, so I'm sure they will upgrade on these gore effects, so it still feels and looks great. On top of a number of ways to tear through them, the assemblage of different infected, gotta get used to this, Ridden, give it a bit of a spice up too. Having the typical walkers alongside the running types of infected, with armored cop zombies that require shooting the helmet off before being able to hit their weak point of their head, on top of the numerous specials, gives a variety of baddies. It's good to have the uncommon infected being prevalent and a recurring factor, and based on RNG through each campaign, instead of restricting them to specific levels. I really don't have any complaints with the commons, except for how long their reach is when it comes to smacking people, making melee weapons and shoving feeling worthless, and how their slowness can be a bit too easy. But the fact that they can easily swarm you and overwhelm you in seconds flat, I'm not too guffawed about some of the Ridden being a bit slower than others. But to be honest, when these hordes are summoned, they can be obnoxious to deal with as they spawn in all sorts of corners, but that is the point of the director, to cause this chaos. But one thing I can't get over when you are swarmed by the commons is the fact that the shove and melee weapons are barely effective, and commons aren't as easy or manageable to take down like the ones in Left 4 Dead. Although I do have to say I like the lore and I like we're getting kind of an origin story, seeing that it is a parasite that I think was unearthed in Antarctica. I do want to do a why you wouldn't survive on the Back 4 Blood virus and some special infected profiles in the future, but as for now, I want to wait until there's more details when they do come out. I am excited to see how this parasite, when it interacts with water, how it becomes this just outbreak that takes over humanity. But there are hints that when this parasite interacts with any kind of water, that it becomes very hostile and very virile. So as we've seen in some local graffiti, that once it gets into the water supply, you are not able to drink from that water, or you will most likely become infected. I cannot wait to get into that, from which I do appreciate a lot, because because that's how Left 4 Dead laid out all of their stuff. They laid out little tidbits here and there throughout campaigns that you yourself had to discover on your own. I like that they're telling a story through visual elements throughout the maps. I am looking forward to that. It rewards people for actually looking at the walls and reading and whatnot. It's great. Speaking of hard to take down Ridden, there are more powerful variants of these infected that will be playable at some point and take some finesse to take out, having special abilities that can hinder or even wipe your team out. I will say before discussing each one, there are two major flaws with the specials in this game that had nagging issues that I want rectified. For one, there seriously needs to be a better visual and or audio cue for the special Ridden, like music cues from the Left 4 Dead series when specials spawn in. That way we know audibly what's coming. Or the special's natural vocal sounds being a bit louder, because the sounds of this game get pretty drowned out by gunshots and freaking crows. The special Ridden are also quite hard to discern in the midst of the overly dark atmosphere and numerous hordes of the game, only really being noticeable and easy to point out with their orange weak spots, kinda like Dead Space. It's really hard to tell who's coming at you most of the time unless they are huger than life. And the first of these that's hard to notice, the Hocker. If the Hunter, Spitter, and Spider-Man had a three-way, the Hocker would be their resulting annoying as hell offspring. Having 4 arms and being able to jump on and cling to walls, it will hit you with projectiles that do damage and has another projectile that, on top of doing residual damage, traps you in place, incapacitated. You can only be freed from this webbing by having another survivor bash you, which can be a very, very high detriment in a game like Back 4 Blood if you're even slightly far away from your teammates, as unlike Left 4 Dead where you can just shoot an enemy infected off at a distance, you have to run up to the person that was webbed and bash them to escape. Sometimes that is just not possible, especially on higher difficulties where rushing past commons can get you damaged heavily. This forces you to stay within a few feet from each other, especially on high difficulties where within seconds you can die just from being trapped in this webbing and a few commons hit you. The Hocker is incredibly hard to discern from common infected at a glance, but due to their hasty and speedy nature and the way it looks on screen, can be quickly discerned, but that's only after it's jumped to a high place and is harder to shoot. Remember, the higher the difficulty, the faster they fire and the more damage the web does, which makes counterplay against them really annoying and feels like the counterplay isn't even there. They do have a weak spot on the middle of their chest and can die very easily. Still, they have extremely high range to the point where when the Gloom Corruption card is active, which adds fog to the map, you are unable to see them when they fire at you in open areas, giving the Jackals from Halo 2 a run for their money on the highest difficulty. Good luck dodging them and trying to shoot them at the same time. Basically what we all consider the Charger's bigger, beefier brother, tall and with a giant girthy arm with a weak point on his shoulder. Their long arm smashes down, damaging and pushing away any cleaner it hits. Don't stand near an edge or you might be taking a sweet dive straight into death's embrace. You could be insta-killed by these Charger-like entities. Well, GG. What? I got knocked off. Which does make a little sense, I'm okay with that. If close by, it can smash its arm back and forth in a huge baby tantrum. And much like the Charger, if it has a straight path to you and is close enough, it will rush at you at a super high speed and smash down on you. And the smashdown on the ground has a splash damage radius around it. So good luck avoiding any damage this guy throws at you. Any kind of melee is useless due to its huge health pool. Plus you will get smashed and lose a bunch of health. Melee is useless due to how much health this thing has. It is ridiculous how much damage it can take. Plus you will just get smashed and lose a bunch of health if you try to smack it. When it comes at you, it walks with its torso sideways, hiding the shoulder that has the weak point, making it extremely hard to kill solo unless in an open area. And good luck in enclosed spaces and hallways, where it's almost impossible to get an angle at its weak spot. In higher difficulties, it takes ridiculous amounts of damage to kill unless you hit its weak point, forcing you and your team to buy grenades, which even a direct grenade explosion will not kill this thing. which forces your team to buy grenades just to be able to take it out quickly because it would take too long to kill normally at higher difficulties, just to deal with one special Ridden. So despite it being a terror to see coming up, it feels like it has a little too much health, even with an easy weak point to shoot at. Its absurd health becomes more noticeable when you face two at once because of the Bruiser Swarm corruption cards. I feel like it needs to be dialed back, but it is still a terror to go against, and I like the design and the way it plays. There needs to be some tweaking with it. There's also one issue that we exploited sometimes with the tall boy, and it's the fact that he is just too big to go through certain entryways. Like there was a doorway in the elevator shaft in the first level where he was just too big to go through, and we just shot him to death and he could do nothing about it. While that is funny to deal with computers, I could see that being a real big issue when we have PvP versus. I would hate to be a bruiser and get stuck in a doorway when trying to get a survivor. But I do gotta say, seeing him get stuck in this doorway, there were a few instances where I noticed infected had their own routes to sneak up on survivors and attack them from high perspectives. I am very happy to see that, and very happy to see these maps have versus infected in mind, giving them routes to attack the survivors from. That is a great plus going forward. Speaking of specials that need tweaking, the Retch takes the boomer and spitter and smacks them together in a weird evolve-like hybrid. We get this liquid spewing beast. Much like its parents, it can spew acid at far distances, but this time will damage on impacts. That spit will hurt the second it hits you, and it lasts like a flamethrower from a long distance, much greater distances than you would expect. And it also, on top of that, wherever it lands, leaves pools of acid that cause damage while you are on top of it, which gives for some devastating and gnarly combinations that can severely damage survivors, especially in tandem with the Hocker. Imagine someone separated from the group, you have them stuck in the spider web, and then you have the Retch show up with his spit. It's damaging you on impact with the acid, and then acid's on the ground. The damage is going to tally up, and the healing is just not going to be able to keep up with that. When you shoot and kill it outside of its weak point, the orange spot on it, it can explode, and any survivors, aka cleaners, will be coated in its guts. And just like the boomer, the survivors coated in its innards will draw the attention of a newly spawned horde. And to an even higher extent from the boomer, the explosion that it causes from its death has quite a knockback, enough to push you over any high edges or cliffs. You are not going to be hanging off the edge. What happened to me? I got insta-killed. This is definitely going to need to be fixed for versus in the future, but in the meantime, it's actually quite funny. Oh, fuck this, I'll hit you. Oh! Wait, I'm alive? No, I'm dead. While I could see a lot of fun can be had while playing as it in a future versus mode, I see some problems with it going forward if it remains as is. For one, the acid can be sprayed from so far away that it can easily drench survivors and their surrounding area and easily get away in the midst of an attack. There's really no drawback to it if you're firing from too far away. Its explosion to coat survivors on death can be nullified if its weak spot is hit. That means if you shoot its weak spot, it will not blow up. And I could see that being a bit bothersome in versus, as one of the strategies of the boomer from Left 4 Dead was to jump in and force players to not just be gun happy about every encounter, as shooting it would always cause it to explode with its minuscule health. But now, with the Retch, it requires precision aim instead of holding down your fire, which survivors won't have a hard time of doing since the Retch has so much more health and gives you time to hit its weak spot, that way it doesn't blow up. Another nagging issue is the acid it leaves on the ground after spewing. I can almost never tell when I'm directly in acid unless I'm looking at bubbles coming off the ground and I'm watching my health drastically go down. The acid really needs some kind of on-screen notification or noticeable sound notification when you are walking through it or in it. With the spitter's acid, you knew almost immediately that you are in it because of not only the green bubbles on your screen, but the melting annoying, loud as hell chipping sound effects that get even louder the longer you are in the acid and the more it's been on the ground, and the music that accompanies it to immediately grab the player's attention. It would be really nice to know that I'm in acid without having to figure it out after I've lost a ton of health. And a side note for the Retch and the Hocker, it seems we're having too many special infected that can attack you from long distances without any real detriment. When we had the Spitter and Smoker, when they attacked from a long distance, they were slowed down, or if their attack was cut, they were frozen in place for a little bit, giving the survivors some time to attack back. It seems like with the Hocker and the Retch though, they can attack from just about any distance and be pretty safe. So I am really worried of how this would turn out in versus when it comes to balancing issues.
Oh, hello there!
And the king of them all, the Ogre. We all freaked out when we saw this in the trailer. The 20-foot kaiju tank, when you first see it, is an oh shit moment. The fact that it rips obstacles out of its way to get to your squad, how it can hurl tank-like rock goop balls out of its chest to hit you from afar, or grabbing you and chucking you across the room like a rag doll. It really gets the adrenaline pumping. But after the first time you face it, it feels like less of a threat to tackle and more of just an inconvenience you can do nothing about unless you dump tons of grenades into it to delete it. The fact that it just becomes a stationary, gigantic bullet sponge that can do nothing against you while you sit in doorways or places it cannot reach, like safe rooms, and chip away at its health until it either runs away or you gank, neither feels engaging or rewarding to attempt to bring down. And it feels more like a let's make a Destiny style boss with no reward. Maybe if it dropped a large sum of copper for killing it, maybe it would be worth it to spend the time on this Leviathan. Of course, it is a thrill ride at first to run away from it while balancing the hordes that are in front of you and special infected nearby. But once you get to a certain point where it cannot reach you whatsoever, that's about it. Think of it this way, it's like Indiana Jones running away from the boulder, except at the end, we just spend a lot of time just watching him kick the boulder for a few minutes once it rolled past him. It's easy for me to say that the Ogre is a gigantic disappointment for me, as I thought it would be the next evolution of the tank. But it turned out to just be an undefeatable force that looks like an evolved monster that never got to be paid DLC. Keep this in mind. The tank was this relentless, beefy machine that pursued you no matter where you went, unless you killed it. You have to spend the time to take it out. But the Ogre either stops at doorways because he is too big, or runs off when he gets too many boo-boos. And I really hope there is more to it than what I experienced. The Ogre is the biggest disappointment in Back 4 Blood, and I want there to be something else to it. Now, before I leave the Ridden to discuss other points, there is the witch level screamer threat still left in the room we haven't touched yet. Also, please don't touch it. The Snitch is this Last of Us looking worm-headed infected that, if you get too close or shoot it without killing it extremely fast, will let out an ear-piercing screech. That will, of course, summon a horde. So basically, acting as the wandering variant of the witch from Left 4 Dead 2. But this time, using the elements of the scrapped Screamer special infected to yell for reinforcements. Although it does feel like it's a bit of an unavoidable mess, it feels like it actively walks towards cleaners frequently. But besides that, it does give the survivors a reason to not just be trigger happy at every corner, just by a little bit, which is always good for changing up gameplay and the formula. And accidentally triggering a preventable horde always makes for a hilariously evil way of the director screwing with you. Which, there's also murders of crows and alarmed doors that can easily set these hordes off as well. So paying mind to your environment of where you're going and what you're opening visually and audibly is necessary. Just be sure you have mindful teammates and do not play with bots, as the bots love to walk up to birds and snitches and take every chance they can to let that be known. Which, on higher difficulties, hordes spawning can be a death sentence. Which, side note, bots do need some major tweaking, running into bad situations that get them downed or killed and screw over the rest of the team. If a player has a slow time getting into the next chapter because of server issues, the bot that takes their place in the meantime will actively spend their hard-earned copper on worthless items like the Molotov. Sometimes their pathing can be a bit off as well. But again, it's in alpha, so maybe the bots will get better, maybe not. I mean, they kinda act similarly to the brain-dead but perfect aiming AI of Left 4 Dead, which those AI themselves are over a decade old now. Now I have to bring this up momentarily as it was a pretty nagging issue for me. Some areas of the one campaign we experienced in Evansburg are incredibly dark even with the brightness up and are just too hard to see most of the time. It's the fact that there is no toggleable flashlight for you to use if you're having issues seeing the environment around you or if you're trying to make more precise shots on zombies in dark corners. There is a flashlight programmed in the game, so it's not like it's there, but it only comes on automatically when it chooses to if you enter dark enough areas. But honestly, the option of using a flashlight yourself would be much more preferable. Although don't get me wrong, the lighting in some areas that it is dark is quite good, and when it's in the dusk-like areas with fog, I really enjoy the sight of it. The ambience, the atmosphere, really great, but honestly, a lot of this could be rectified if we just had that toggleable flashlight. But good job to the animators and set piece designers. Now there are 3 difficulties when playing a campaign: Classic, Survival, and Nightmare. And any difficulties other than Classic forces players to, well, of course, work as a team, but not in a fun, dynamic way. Classic is a bit more chill. You get 3 chances to beat the campaign, you lose an attempt if everyone dies, and if you wipe 3 times, you have to restart the campaign, along with the chance to be incapped twice like in Left 4 Dead before fully dying if you get down to 3rd time. On the next difficulty setting of Survival, you get 3 attempts, but get 0 incaps, instantly dying when your health hits 0. And on the hardest difficulty of Nightmare, you only get 2 attempts at the campaign at all, alongside being instantly dead when you get downed. As my buddy Cakeslayer has shown me, anything above Classic demands decent deck builds that force less variety and less diverse card choices, with the highest difficulty Nightmare almost forcing exact similar deck builds among all 4 people on your team, unless you are PC FPS veterans along with yourself. But I don't want to become a super dead hard try hard at the game to enjoy it. It needs to be a bit more of a casual experience that you can get better at instead of obsessively playing it. Even then, you are at the mercy of the game director and the corruption cards, churning up the almost undodgeable capabilities of the special Ridden. Hockers insta-spit the moment they see you, commons smack you the moment they even get in melee range, not giving you a chance to smack back before they even do damage to you, and tall boys have so much health you need to be in the open area. Hopefully you're not in a closed space with a bunch of commons, in the open to shoot their weak point, or in a hallway to be able to throw a grenade, or else your team will lose a ton of ammo and probably health as well. And there's even Retches, when on Nightmare difficulty, even if you're running at full sprint, the vomit will hit you perfectly out in the open, which there's a lot of open areas. Look at it this way, it wouldn't be as bad facing these increased difficulties if you didn't only have 2 quarters to put into this arcade machine, otherwise known as continues. The inclusion of continues tips the scale heavily for me. On one side, it makes you take the campaign run at hand more seriously, forcing players to say, hey, you have 1 more try, so don't go dying now, we have to take this more seriously. So it makes players play and act more efficiently, or at least that's the desired outcome. For my friends and I, having to restart the entire campaign after the team dies twice or thrice really deflates the fun of it. It makes us feel like the progress we have done was not worth it. It wouldn't be as bad if it weren't for the fact that there are certain corruption cards that can make one playthrough more than difficult. And it will probably just mean once you see a certain corruption card like the Bruiser Swarm, have you restart the whole campaign as soon as you see the cards, until you get corruption cards that you yourself want to work with, since you don't want to waste the time dealing with Bruiser hordes on the highest difficulty that only allows one continue. And even though I only played with groups of 4, I could see the continue system being an annoyance when joining random lobbies with others who just bolt ahead, die, and ruin your limited amount of tries. Or if you play by yourself, bots playing like bots usually do, and getting themselves and you in bad situations if your luck is bad. Continues honestly don't feel like they belong unless in a separate game mode like a mutation, where that is kind of the gimmick, but that being a part of the base campaign experience on higher difficulties, no. At least give us an extra continue on each difficulty or something, but I'm not a fan of this. That is right up there with the Ogre for me. But some of you might like the challenge of it. I personally don't. Now, speaking of the challenges of certain things, the aesthetic of the maps involved in Evansburg are great and fun to go through on the first few times. Going through a ransacked set of buildings and city blocks, going into forests, and eventually a bridge leading to a boat and military rescue. It felt like a mixture of No Mercy, Death Toll, and the finale of the parish. With the finale in question, just adding a speedrun-esque strategy of just picking up bombs, getting to the bottom floor of the boat to plant them, and getting back as fast as possible while micromanaging your team and making sure they don't get killed. The map design, although, is pretty linear with not much variation in where you can go and explore, even when the director adds an unlockable / alarmed door, or, well, you know what, not much variations in the map between plays, besides infected spawns that will be different between each play, as even the crows that appear spawn in the exact same areas, making them very predictable and unavoidable once you're used to the game. There were many claustrophobic areas where certain specials like the Bruiser are not fun to go against with his dashing and slamming abilities. It feels like how the infected spawn, especially on higher difficulties where they predominantly spawn in front of you and around you, that you are forced to just keep running backwards or to areas with just one door entryways, like the safe room, to funnel in any infected, especially since vendors only really spawn in safe rooms. So a lot of the time, especially on high difficulties, you will just end up running back to the safe room, and it kind of ruins the flow and dynamic of the game. And I also feel like the director has a lot less say in what goes on in the map and spawning in dangers and obstacles. I feel like the director this time around has a lot less to say in what goes on in the map and spawning of dangers and obstacles, and that the director has to go with what the corruption card producer plays out. It doesn't feel like the director has much say in what goes on outside of spawning infected. Yeah, it can spawn infected if you dwell in an area too long, but the actual hordes that make a difference are when you yourself set off a car alarm or door alarm or trigger a snitch or murder of crows. But that's not the director summoning that horde. That's you yourself doing that, and not the game's AI director. The AI director needs a lot more work to have the same glory and replayability factors that the director from Left 4 Dead had, like being able to force alternate paths that the survivors have to take, like in the parish's cemetery or Dark Carnival's fenced-off paths. I want the director to make the map different each time you play it, making you have to take different paths because of certain obstacles, not just, oh, here's an alarmed door, now we have to just kind of work around it or have the infected just walk up to it and break it, which is weird that if you have an infected break an alarm door, it doesn't set it off. I don't know about that. Or now here's a locked door for goodies, sometime it's not there. There's just a lot that I feel like could be done better with the director, because all it is right now is just, oh, I'm spawning infected. Yeah, that's kind of your job, but you can do other things. Now, one more thing before I get into the biggest thing about what I am hesitant about Back 4 Blood is that I loved the scrupulous amount of Shaun of the Dead sticky note Easter eggs in the safe rooms. Having praised it and watched it dozens of times, the Shaun of the Dead references like "you've got red on you," "dogs can look up," "go kill Phil," I loved it. And I equally fangirled when I saw the "this used to be a nice neighborhood" and "I'll be going home in a box" sticky notes, referencing Left 4 Dead's Coach and Bill respectively. The more Easter eggs that we get are always welcome. I love that they have these little Easter eggs for other zombie franchises. Outside of that excitement over words on a wall, there is something else written on the wall. I will say, despite their history with Left 4 Dead and their repertoire, we also cannot forget their history with Evolve at 2K. And seeing that the Deluxe and Premium editions are already saying that Special Infected and new characters will be limited behind some paywalls, which, considering Left 4 Dead never included any new Special Infected unless a whole new game was involved, it's hard to say what side of the fence I'm on here when it comes to these Deluxe editions where season passes will only last about a year, especially since this time around paid-for cosmetics will be involved from what I've heard. It is a bit concerning that major chunk of paid-for content can create a larger divide between seasoned Back 4 Blood players and people that get into the game months and years after release, especially when new characters, weapons, and cards are dropped, giving other players an advantage over others, effectively locking a portion of the player base out of playing an integral part of versus and campaign mode. Either way, it's a very, very touchy subject for developers, consumers, gamers, and companies, as monetization and downloadable content becomes more and more scrutinized by the player base, but more widely accepted to use by gaming companies. But as long as the downloadable content isn't as egregious as it was with Evolve and its many, I cannot repeat myself, many paid DLC stuff like slightly different colors on characters and weapons for $2 a piece, we may be fine. But again, only time will tell by what exactly the paid DLC entails. The way me and my friends see it, we need to have a pretty chunky, a beefy base game with tons of content to play around with for a while before even considering diving into other paid content that requires more dollars to attain. The bottom line that I want for this game, Turtle Rock Studios, and its wonderful staff and developers, is for this game to have the longevity and replayability that the Left 4 Dead series has retained for over a decade with its simple yet streamlined and effective experience. Considering one of Back 4 Blood's main appeals and selling points that's on their website is its extreme replayability. I would say as of right now, it's still looking to be a great spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead 2 from its 4 survivors against hordes of commons and special infected, with beautiful, dark Ridden parts of the environment needing to be obnoxiously manipulated to get across, like pouring dirt from a pipe to get over an obstacle or dropping a drawbridge that summons a horde, just like the good old unreasonable infected ears of Left 4 Dead, to funny and referential graffiti and information on the world on the safe room walls, with a director that wishes to make each playthrough a different experience. Well, that about wraps this up. What did you think? What did you enjoy from this sample of Turtle Rock's latest game coming up? What would you improve, remove, or add? Were my critiques and ramblings not worth your time and not worth my effort? What did I get wrong? What should happen? Let me know in the comments. Let's have a civil discussion and voice what we want out of this game going forward. If you want to support the channel, liking and subscribing is all I really ask for, but donating is always appreciated to get featured here, like a longtime supporter, a Patreon patron, a YouTube channel member, or donating during my live streams. As you can tell, my voice is almost out because I've spent 2 straight hours recording this without water, so bear with me. And again, let's have a civil discussion. Let's not berate each other, and let's not berate the hardworking team at Turtle Rock, and just encourage them instead. They are great people. We love you, Turtle Rock Studios, and I love you, everyone here. Happy New Year, stay happy, stay ridden free, stay clean, and like always, stay wow, baby.